Good morning, everyone. So I am just going to give it a couple of moments before we do get started today. I can see people starting to join, but I know some people, there always tends to be a technical issue somewhere, just so to give everybody a chance to join. But quick introduction, I'm Lauren, so I work for Nexus Multi Academy Trust. We work in partnership with Go for Growth, which is why I am hosting today's session. So the session is going to be getting started as a supplier to the public sector, and it is January 22nd. Thank you everyone for joining. I had mentioned a moment ago that we are just waiting a second before we start to give everybody a chance to join, but I think we've probably got good enough numbers to get started now anyway. So can I just check, would somebody be able to test the chat function for me? It's just before we get started, I want to check whether can you see notes in the sides of my screen, or is it just a big screen presented? I just want to make sure that the notes aren't shared on the screen. But I think we're fine. But also if somebody could just pop something in the chat just so we can see that it's working. Chat is okay. Thank you very much, Janice. Okay, so make a quick introduction then. So as I've mentioned already, for those who may not have joined as of yet, I'm Lauren, so I'm Procurement and Contracts Manager for Nexus Multi Academy Trust. We work in partnership with Go for Growth, which is why I'm hosting today's session. So you may have noticed or been informed when you joined, but the session is being recorded today. The reason for that is so that we can send a copy around to everybody who has registered to attend today. So if anybody's not been able to make a meeting, or if you are wanting to watch it back in slower time, you are able to do so. So questions can be asked via the Q&A or chat function, either or. So I may, dependent on how we're doing with time, I will either answer all the questions at the end, or if there are quick questions coming through to the chat as we move forward. If it's a quick question I can just answer on the spot, I'll just maybe cover that. So the slides that we do run through in today's session will be shared. So if we don't go into something that you want to see in as much detail, we will be sending the slides out. And if you've got any questions, you are able to ask follow-ups. So what we'll be covering today then, so we're going to be looking at how the public sector buys goods and services. So we're going to take a look at what you're likely to need in place before you not can bid, but maybe would want to bid. Just making kind of sure that you've got everything in order before you do start spending that real time responding to public sector opportunities. So we're going to look at how to find real opportunities, especially opportunities that are suited to your business, and that's something that Go for Growth can support with as well. So we'll run through that in today's session as well. And then we're going to be having a look at some common barriers that you may find or experience and how you may overcome them. So I do have some notes alongside me. So you do see me looking down. I am just reading my notes. Just want to make sure that I do cover everything that we have planned today. So moving forward then. So I want to do a quick introduction to the public sector and why you may be looking to work with the public sector. And it's not something I'm going to dwell on, because the fact that you are all attending today or you've registered for this webinar, it tells me that you are interested in working with the public sector. Now, the way in which you may find yourself working with the public sector can vary. So it may be that your organisation is wanting to bid for a contract on your own, or it may be as part of a collaboration or a consortia, or what it may be is that you are working for the public sector via the supply chain. So you may be a subcontractor to a provider on a framework, for example, something along those lines. Now, what we Go for Growth are trying to do is make those opportunities much more visible. Any support that anybody takes from Go for Growth is completely free of charge. And what we do in the kind of training that we offer, such as running these webinars, is just try and support the marketplace to understand how to bid for these opportunities. So taking a look into public sector contracts then, and why they need, why the public sector is a good customer then. And how you may be able to access public sector opportunities more easily. So I've popped a few bullet points on the screen there. So it's a stable market. It's worth billions, is the public sector. it's accessible to all organisations, and that is the public sector are actually supporting working with smaller organisations, the SME VCSE market, procurement legislation and procurement policy supports that as well. So yeah, it's a really good customer to try and be able to access. I guess, and also developing local economies. So the public sector offer then. So the reason we've popped this slide into the public sector offer is how you may look at engaging with the public sector, how to actually get into conversations with them to be ensuring that you are part of the opportunity. So a big thing in the public sector is pre-market engagement, and that's the first bullet that we've got on the screen at the moment. So for contracts that are above threshold, especially, there are requirements to publish like information regarding pre-market engagement. So whether you have hosted pre-market engagement, and what that kind of informed, you'd post a notice of that, or if you haven't already done the pre-market engagement and you are planning pre-market engagement, there is a notice which is published to find a tender service. We'll talk about find a tender service later during the session, but pre-market engagement is a good way for you to be able to, when a contracting authority is planning a tender opportunity that they're going to put out to the market, you host a pre-market engagement to help shape how that might look. So at Nexus, we hosted a pre-market engagement event back on Monday for a framework that we have coming up for ICT services, and it was kind of a chance for Nexus to speak to the market about what we're planning on doing probably in the near future, but also ask how you as a supplier think that opportunity would be best going out to the market, helping us make sure that we're not, the plans that we have in place at the moment aren't causing any barriers to entry. So pre-market engagement events, once you've identified opportunities that you're interested in, that they're a really good thing to get involved in. Same as meet the buyer events. Meet the buyer events are more likely to be kind of like built to sectors. So there may be a construction meet the buyer event. It's a construction based meet the buyer event, and it's where a contracting authority, say for example a local council, may just host a morning session or sometimes a full day session. Gives a chance for suppliers to attend, have conversation with other contracting authorities maybe. Chambers host these kind of meet them, they host events that buyers will attend as well. So any kind of place-based business events such as the Leeds Business Week, which is mentioned there, just kind of getting out and about to these networking events, but also meet the buyer events if you are targeting I guess a kind of a specific area. If you're interested in working with your local council, see what the local council are up to, and how to get involved in those. A really good way to do that. And I think it's something that we've got again planned to cover later in today's session, but if we don't get a chance to run into it in as much detail, a really good place to be looking to engage with the public sector is online. I mean, social media platforms are becoming more and more useful for tons of things, and that is engagement in events and what you're kind of getting involved in. I would say especially LinkedIn. Contracting authorities are always posting on LinkedIn. It's a really good place to be able to have a read and understand maybe what's important to those contracting authorities, and again what they've got going on. If they're hosting an event, if you can get there, be really something that would be helpful. But then also finally on here then we've got sectoral events. So for example, Net Zero Week, if you're wanting to build skills on specific topics, so it may be an event based on social value, or it may be that we're hosting events such as bid skills or this webinar today, just attending events that will help build your knowledge on how to work with the public sector or good practices maybe. So the next slide we've got in here then is the process. So in terms of the process that the public sector is likely to follow. So again, this is more likely to be for above threshold opportunities, but there are processes that will be followed regardless of value. So you'll tend to find that each contracting authority will have their own kind of procurement policies in place, which will inform the process that they'll take based on maybe certain values. So for example, Nexus, and I will continue to use Nexus as an example, just with it being where I'm working, but we have our procurement policy, which outlines for certain values. So above 7,000, this is our process. Above 50,000, this is the process that we'll follow. So again, if you're interested in working with specific contracting authorities, taking a look on their website and what they're posting about how they procure, is a really good idea to understand what to be looking out for. But what we've done here is just kind of like outlined a basic process that you may see. Give me a moment. I just want to make sure that I've covered everything. So yes, we wanted to just run over thresholds so you're aware of what you may be likely to see for certain values. And like I said, if it's above threshold, now dependent on the type of contract. So if you're looking at a works contract, these are new thresholds as of January 2026. So we've got 5,193,000 for works contracts. For non-work contracts, so like goods and services, it is 207,720. And then there is like a light touch contract. So that may be, again, I'm using education as an example, but it may be a catering contract, for example. If it's a light touch contract, it's 633,540. So they're kind of the thresholds that you'd be looking at. So especially I think maybe the non-work, so the goods and services is one that I always note because it's something that's very commonly procured. So 207,720 for that one. Okay, so running through the process then, and again, I'm just making sure that I've covered everything on my notes. Give me a moment. Sorry about that. So we've already kind of had a look at pre-market engagement events then. So as we said, if it is above threshold, especially there are, I've not included a screenshot of the notices that are likely to be included or will be included dependent on the process being followed when it is above that 208 threshold. You'll see pre-market engagement. So we've already discussed that. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on that. But if anybody would like any more information on anything that we discuss, as we've said, you can let us know and we'll discuss it in more detail following the webinar. I just want to make sure that I don't run out of time. So next then, the advertisement. So you'll see the advertisement of the opportunity, whether that be via the contracting authorities specific procurement portal. So each contracting authority is like to have a tender portal, or they will inform you in the tender advertisement what process they'll how they're going to be advertising the opportunity outside of find a tender service. So find a tender service is where contracting authorities opportunities are published. So it's a government hosted portal. It's not just one contracting authority posted on there, it's across the public sector, especially above that threshold, those threshold numbers. So they'll be advertised on Find a Tender Service. Outside of Find a Tender Service, they may also be advertised on their specific tender portals. So contracting authorities, so local authorities in Yorkshire, we see a lot of contracting authorities in Yorkshire using Your Tender. That's just one example of a procurement portal that you may see. There's Proactis. Proactis is really popular for local authority as well. Then the procurement specific questionnaire. So under the Procurement Act, which came into play last year, the procurement specific questionnaire was kind of introduced to replace the standard selection questionnaire. So now, as part of your registration process on Find a Tender Service, you will answer supplier information, which you can use for each kind of bid that you submit to the public sector. You can either share via like a share code, you can download a PDF of the information that you've shared, and you upload that as part of your tender submission to the contracting authority. Say maybe you'd share it with Nexus, but then there's also a procurement specific questionnaire. Next then, so the specification, evaluation criteria and weightings. So this is, when I've said the process, these are kind of the documents that you'd be looking to complete or review as part of the tender process. So there's the pre-market engagement, there's the tender advertise, and this is the kind of documentation that you'll see within the tender if you do choose to actually bid for the opportunity. So the specification, evaluation criteria and weightings. The specification will give you an overview of the opportunity, so what it is that the contracting authority are looking to buy. They'll lay out how so there'll be a quality element that you as a supplier will respond to within the invitation to tender or within these invitation to tender, but also the evaluation criteria and weightings, it will break down kind of like the questions you're being asked and how they are going to be scored, and so that the contracting authority can then be held accountable when it comes to the evaluation stage, how they have marked each quality question, how they've marked pricing. So the evaluation criteria and weightings, that's going to be the breakdown of how they will be scoring your submission. So quality, technical and pricing questions. So we've kind of just covered off those. So within the tender documentation, it will give you an overview of the quality kind of questions, what it is that the contracting authority again is looking for, those technical questions and pricing questions. So you'll complete a pricing schedule, it's usually named, as part of a tender submission just to understand costs of the contract or the services that you'd provide, maybe via a framework. Next, just one more thing on number 6, actually. You as a supplier may have questions regarding the process. So that is a clarification question. And during a tender process that the public sector follow, within the ITT, there'll be a timeline somewhere within that, which breaks down when you need to submit your bid by, but also there's a clarification process where you as a supplier can ask any questions regarding the tender documents. If something doesn't quite make sense to you, you can ask the clarification question, but there's likely to be a clarification deadline, and this is likely to be like at least maybe a week or so before the tender submission deadline. So just really important to make sure that you're reading through the ITT to make sure that you understand full timescales so you don't miss out on the opportunity to ask the contracting authority questions. Again, actually Go for Growth can help with this kind of thing. So if you are wanting to understand a document in more detail, you can book a call with us or drop us an email. Our contact details will be shared later on, so you can ask us questions. We can help you break that stuff down. Legal terms and conditions. So the terms and conditions of the arrangement. So especially like kind of like in a framework, the framework terms and conditions or the call off terms and conditions that would be in place as part of the contract that's being awarded. And then finally, feedback. So once you submit a tender to the contracting authority, once they've evaluated and decided or come to a decision on who the winning bidder would be or who is to be awarded to the framework. Say, for example, maybe in a framework situation, there are 5 places on that framework, but you receive 10 bids or you receive 20 bids and you said that there'll only be 10 spaces on that framework. The contracting authority should be giving feedback to unsuccessful bidders to understand maybe where they could have improved going forward. So if there was a specific quality question that they've marked or been marked quite low on, there would be an explanation given. So you didn't answer this element of the question, or you didn't explain this as part of your response, kind of thing. So if you don't receive feedback, make sure that you're asking for that. It'd be a really useful tool that the public sector should be providing. So we're moving on then to must-have toolkit items. So these are things that Go for Growth, when speaking to contracting authorities, we believe would be good practice for suppliers to have in place ready for bidding for public sector contracts. Just because it's things that you may be asked about, it helps you form better quality responses. So case studies, for example, it's really good for providers to be trying to get case studies in place because it can help you respond to quality questions. So you'll tend to find in a lot of maybe public sector contracts, you'll be asked how you're going to deliver this contract or give an example of when you've delivered a similar contract, that kind of thing, to understand really or how you'll roll out the contract. And you could use case studies to form part of your response. And it may be that you're asked to provide case studies in some tender processes. So these kind of things can be really useful to kind of have in place. Go for Growth have guidance and tools to help you build case studies on our website. So if you did want to, it's actually a live link in the slide deck that you can click out to and have a look at that for some guidance. But yeah, a really handy tool to have before looking. Well, it's not before looking. They can be developed once you're looking or once you've found an opportunity, but it's something good to have prepared if you possibly can. So an understanding of your customer, as we've already said, so keep it informed with what your customer is up to. So reading their procurement policy maybe, or familiarizing yourself with the processes that they will follow, so um you maybe you're not approaching them in a way that isn't appropriate. Like if you can see that we're posting that we procure our IT system via a framework, or it's not due for another few years, and we've posted that on our website, it can stop those kind of like sales calls where we maybe as the procurement team can't give you any information because we just haven't planned what we're going to be doing as of yet. So yeah, again, really good tool to understand your customer, but also having a read through the website just generally to understand kind of what's important to them, what their kind of mottos are, goals, how they're working with the local community, so local strategy, visibility. So again, getting out there as a supplier, so attending these events that we've discussed previously. So getting involved in pre-market engagement, attending networking events, being informed with regards to maybe reach the public sector. So attending events such as we are hosting today to kind of get that run through of process and understand how to best I guess, attack opportunities so that you know what to be doing, how to do it to the best of your ability. And again, that's what we are here to support you to do as well. So it's great that you're attending the event. Um, so social value, so having an understanding of social value. Again, we have like informal videos. There was one we uploaded actually only a couple of weeks back, which was social value kind of overview, just to give providers an understanding of what social value means. What is the difference between social value that you offer just part as part of like your core service in comparison to the social value that you offer specifically to that contract. So that'd be a good one to have a listen to if you are interested in understanding social value a little more. Carbon net zero, the same, and knowledge of the competition process. So again, how we've kind of gone through some of the documents that you may come across, running through kind of things. So those procurement specific questionnaires, the specification, understand what all this kind of stuff is, puts you in good stead to when you do find an opportunity that you're interested in to actually be able to go straight for it and not have to spend so much time understanding everything in as much detail. Once you've kind of tackled a few tender opportunities, in my opinion, you'll tend to start finding similarities between how documents are structured, the language used, scoring methodologies, that kind of thing. You'll see that there are commonalities between different tenders, which is it's great. So next then, so we've covered find a tender service in bits as we've been moving through the slides today. But as I mentioned, find a tender service or the central digital platform is where you will find tender opportunities advertised. So it's where contracting authorities will post their notices, so the preliminary market engagement notice or a planned procurement notice, the actual tender notice when the tender does go live. Find a tender service is where contracting authorities will post those. The reason we've put Find a Tender Service Central Digital Platform is because they kind of started off as a separate thing when the Procurement Act was kind of ready to come into play. How it was going to be structured, how it looked wasn't I don't think anybody was entirely sure. But Find a Tender Service and Central Digital Platform is basically it is one now. So you have the one login as a supplier. What you will do is, as you've mentioned, so you input your supplier information, which you can share with contracting authorities, and that's all in the same place. It is a mandatory registration for suppliers. So if you are wanting to access the public sector opportunities, you have to register for an account with Find a Tender Service. Publishing of procurement pipelines as well for contracting authorities that it's relevant to. They will post or publish procurement pipelines to the platform. Just taking a drink 1 second. The YouTube, there is a live YouTube link there to a demonstration of Find a Tender Service. So registration, just kind of talking you through how to navigate the site in a bit more detail. So information then. So what I've just popped in here is a few questions that you could be asking yourself. So when you're considering opportunities in the public sector, there are some key questions, and it's kind of like questions that the contracting authorities are saying would be good for suppliers to be asking before maybe going for these opportunities or contacting us to understand how we're going to be working with the market and what is going to be going out to market, how we're procuring basically. So do we buy what you're selling? And if we do we buy it directly from organisations like yours as part of a bigger family of products? So if you sell cleaning materials, do we procure that via a larger facilities management contract, for example? So would it be something that you'd subcontract to? So would you be if it was a single supplier framework, would you be awarding the contract to the single supplier on that framework, and then we would be the subcontractor contracting that work to the supplier of the framework? So who looks after what you do within the public sector? So whilst procurement will normally run contract opportunities above certain values, there will be other decision makers within the public sector organisation. So what there'll be different processes run basically, and every public sector organisation below threshold will have a process that they'll follow. So that may be, as we've mentioned, Nexus have got a procurement policy that outlines how we will be procuring certain value things. So I've written some examples down here. So opportunities or contracts worth say £10,000, maybe just a 3 quote process. So we'll reach out to providers asking for a quote, and it may be that we only go out to 3. 25k may be advertised on a portal, or 100,000 might go through a full tender process. But then again, those that are above threshold, they will be posted to find a tender service. There will be pre-market engagement involved. It may be that we set other specifics, so as a minimum as part of a contract worth over 200,000, we put a minimum of sorry, it wouldn't be 210, would it? So 200,000, we'll say. We're going to put a mandatory 10% weighting on social value. So they'll most all and this we've kept these are all kind of things that we've run over in a little more detail that I've noted to include on this slide actually. So there'll almost always be a contract register on a contracting authority's website. As so kind of giving you an idea of what they're going to be purchasing in the future. So if you look on Nexus's website, again, we have our pipeline that kind of covers what we're going to be doing in the next 18 months. So if you can find that information, as I've mentioned previously, it's really good to keep yourself informed, and you're approaching the people that you're hoping to sell to in the right way. So some other things that might be useful when you are looking for opportunities then. So to take social value into account. So thinking about your social impact. So does what you do, or what you want to do for the public sector, does it create new jobs, for example? Is there an opportunity for you to employ somebody in the local area if it's a local contract? For example, just realised that I've I want to make sure that my laptop stays like that. Give me 1 second, my apologies. Fantastic. I realised that I had the wrong lead in my laptop and I didn't want it to die. I do apologise about that. But yes, so ways in which that you may be able to demonstrate social value. So if you're going for a certain contract for a certain value, what would that allow you to achieve? Whether it was training, whether it was employment, whether it was apprenticeships. They're just a couple of examples. But yeah, think about your social impact. So net zero carbon then. So whilst legislation currently says that contracts above 5 million must have a carbon reduction plan, what we are seeing is lots of smaller suppliers actually becoming interested in this, because we are starting to find that carbon reduction planning, or an overview of carbon data can be shared with the contracting authority. It's even something that Nexus have recently introduced. It's not on all contracts, it's on contracts over a certain value that we're actually asking now for carbon data. And we are seeing that in the public sector a lot more. So understanding net zero carbon and having a carbon reduction plan in place. There are tools that you can access on the market to build this information. But if you do need any guidance, please again do let us know. So pipeline notices are now mandatory under the Procurement Act, but it is only for contracts above 2 million in value, and that is only where the public sector, the authority, spends in excess of 100 million per year. But what it doesn't mean is that other contracting authorities aren't guided to publish these pipelines at lower values. I've already mentioned that Nexus do publish their pipeline, and as I say, it covers kind of activity in the near future of what we are going to be working on. But it's good practice for contracting authorities to be posting them at lower values, and you will start seeing those more commonly. So if you do look for them, it can be something that helps you shape maybe the time that you spend in looking for opportunities. Because if you can see that a contract that you're interested in or a framework that's coming up for renewal that you're interested in is going to be going out to tender in July, you can kind of plan towards that. So if you know, try and avoid multiple people being out of the office that 1 week so that you've got time to work on it, or you can put some time aside to build your response to the opportunity. So next then, we're going to take a look at some common pitfalls in bids then. So this is, we've developed these common pitfalls from speaking with our public sector clients, and it's kind of an overview of some of the top 3 things that when we ask them to put in of where we feel marks may be sometimes lost, what those may be. So we've got not answering the question, so not reading the question in conjunction with the specification and answering what they think we want rather than what we actually want. This often results in low scores. So the not answering the question is, so if the contracting authority have asked a question but then included bullet points of what exactly they want you to cover, if you aren't responding to how they've demonstrated. So if they say, can you tell us about an example when you've done this, but please include this thing, and this thing. But if you've then not included the 3 things that they've specifically outlined, you've not answered the question in the way in which they need you to award you marks, and that will have been broken down. Whether if it asks you to refer back to the specification and then the specification isn't mentioned, so your response isn't maybe useful to the contracting authority to understand what they've asked, I guess. So next, not submitting all of the documentation requested. So this could be in a number of ways. So the contracting authority may ask you for a case study. We've used case studies as an example already in this session. And it may be that you're asked for a case study, but you don't submit a case study. If that was asked for as part of the question, you will lose marks for not including it. If you've kind of included the case study as part of the response, it may be different, but and it could be, there are different things. So if we've asked you for a copy of a certificate, for example, and you don't include it, the marks would be lost. So it's just ensuring you are having a really good read of the tender documents. So those ITT, the instructions to tenderers, somewhere there's likely to be a checklist in that, so you can see this is everything that they need, this is everything that I've uploaded. So caveating, so when bidders include conditions or exclusions around scope or price, so it can complicate evaluations for the contracting authority, and any issues. So if you're not sure of how to answer a document, or if you think, oh, this is a bit ambiguous, I could answer it in this way or this way, it is best for you to clarify as part of those clarification questions that we mentioned before, to rather than just submitting what you think you need. If that does happen to be wrong, it makes evaluation tricky for the contracting authority. So next then, specification match or specification requirements. So the challenge of ensuring that the proposal put forward relates to the requirements in the specification. So a lot of the time you'll see, as I've mentioned just now, questions referring back and asking you to refer back to the specification. So how, if they're asking you an example of how you will do something or what you've done, they're asking you to sometimes refer that back to the specification so that it stays relevant to what you're bidding for. And reusing responses. So that can kind of like link into the previous one of specification requirements. So if you're going to be using reusing responses from previous bids, so it may be that you bid in for a few opportunities which are very similar and they're structured in the same way, and you think, oh yeah, I can just copy that one over to the next one. Sometimes well, you really need to be proofreading if you are going to be reusing content from previous bids, because they can be just really easily mistakes can be missed quite easily if that is referencing the contracting authority in a different way, or if the question looks similar but it's actually structured different, a lot more differently than you first off read, I guess. That contracting authorities will be able to tell that it's either not, it'll either come out as not relevant to what you're bidding for, or it will be, you'd maybe lose marks because of the irrelevance in the response. So lack of evidence to support statements made. This is a big one in kind of quality responses. So it may be, for example, there are 5 questions. One is worth 20%, or one is worth 30% of the kind of overall score. But also there will be different like word counts available. So that's a really good way of kind of gauging the level of detail that a contracting authority is looking for from your bid submission. So say, for example, one question has a 500 word count, and then another question has a 250 word count, or 1,000 word count, 250 word count. It's clear from that allocation that the contracting authority is looking for a lot more detail in the 700 word question than the 250 word, because and it's kind of, that should be reflected in the question as well. So if it's a question that they ask you a question with 3 bullet points that you need to cover in addition to the additional the head question, in comparison to one question which may just be to provide examples of previous contracts, you're not likely to need as much room to respond. So yeah, backing up what you're saying. So if you're making a statement of we install gates in this specific way, but there's no then further explanation, what contracting authorities will be looking for is evidence. So like we fit gates in this way, this is the benefit, this is how we do it, this the why, the telling the story of, so if you're saying we do something, why do you do it, how do you do it, what are the benefits, so on and so forth. Um, Key information missing. So from the response, or additional or irrelevant information used. So in questions, we've seen before that although the question hasn't been answered in the way that the contracting authority was looking for, there's been surplus information. So it may be that you started answering the question and maybe used 250 words out of your 1,000 word allocation. So you've answered the question in poor detail, or just not in the way that the contracting authority was looking for, but then gone on to speak about something that hasn't been asked at all. So it's great that you want to tell the contracting authority the story and everything fantastic, but if that's not what the question's asked, you can't pick marks up for that, unfortunately. So awareness of word count, we've already covered that. So if the levels of detail, making full use of it, and ensuring that the content that you are including is relevant. And then assumption by the provider that the client knows what they can deliver. So assuming that maybe you have worked with the contracting authority before, maybe you've attended networking events, and you've been involved in the process, and you speak on LinkedIn or something along those lines. You can't ever assume that just because you have an existing relationship, or you're familiar with the buyer with the contracting authority, they can't assume, like if you haven't explained what they've asked in your responses, you can't assume that they already know, and that will give you marks, because it can't be marked that way. For fairness and transparency. So ensuring that you are telling the story in the bid and not just relying on common knowledge. So standing out from the crowd, then some do's and some don'ts. So I'm not going to go over just because we do only have 10 minutes left, so I don't want to just spend tons of time on these. But again, if there is anything that you want to discuss in more detail, do just let me know. So taking the opportunity to raise clarification questions during the tender process. So do ask those questions. Don't again assume that you know what the contracting authority is looking for. If there's any uncertainty, ask the question. Familiarise yourself with authorities' contract registers, as we've mentioned. A lot of these we've already covered throughout the session, so they're just some things to take home so you can, if you do refer back to the slides. Keep records of case studies and things that you actually have delivered. So previous examples of social value, how you, what process you have, and what case studies are great. So find the right contact person system and keep your details up to date. So if you are wanting to, if you have a particular contracting authority in mind that you know you want to work with, make sure that you are registered on their procurement portal and you are familiar with what it is that they are going to be doing. I did completely skip over the good reputation cultivation of good reputation and relationships. So keeping that kind of professional aura, like if you are posted on LinkedIn, ensuring that the content that you're posting does put you in good stead, show you in good light kind of thing, not posting anything inappropriate to those channels, I guess. Tender process then, so make sure you read and understand thoroughly any questions requiring a response. Focus your responses based on the higher weighted questions. So ensure, so if there's a, like we've said, a 250 mark question, a 1,000 mark question, spend additional time on the 1,000 mark question because you need to put more detail into these questions. So make sure you ask if anything's unclear to you. Don't presume, as we've mentioned, ask those clarification questions. The clarification period is there for a reason, so do definitely utilise it. So make sure you answer the questions fully and use the full word count we've already covered. Make sure you leave sufficient time to respond, so don't leave it last minute. If you can be involved in the kind of like pre-market engagement, if you're aware the opportunity is going to be live, or that it's something that the contracting authority is going to be working on, you can make sure that you've kind of like carved out time to respond. And you're not leaving anything to the last minute. And that would be the same that kind of links into the last bullet. So whether you've submitted everything required in advance of any deadline. So ensuring that once you've put your bid together, that when you are submitting to the tender portal, you are leaving yourself plenty of time. So if the deadline is at midday on Friday, I'd first thing on Friday morning, I'd be trying to submit those documents if possible, if you haven't already done it. Just in case there are any issues such as like internet outages, contracting authorities can't make allocations for late submissions. If it's not submitted, they can't evaluate it, unfortunately. So ensure that you are you're sticking to deadlines or you're aware of them. Oh. So a few don't send. So over sharing on social media, we've kind of already covered that in the last one. Unsolicited marketing, especially to the wrong person. So if you are just kind of cold calling organisations or contracting authorities, it's unlikely maybe that you're able to get to the person that you need to be speaking to. So looking at these other ways of getting involved, so understanding contract registers or pipelines that have been published, reading the processes that are going to be followed, like we said. So for Nexus, this is threshold 1 and this is how Nexus will act, number 2 and this is how Nexus will act, rather than, and if you know that that's not going to be something that the procurement team can help you with over the phone, it's going to be a tender process, you can look into that instead, and that's how you maybe then contact the organisation. Assume the person who is marking your tender submission and knows what you are talking about. So stay away from kind of like lingo, jargon, and acronyms because you are the specialist in your field. So I may use procurement jargon, but if you're not a procurement professional, it may just make absolutely no sense to you, some of the abbreviations that we'd use, and that goes the same for different industries. So if you do have common abbreviations, maybe at least ensure there's an explanation of what it means somewhere within the response. Don't overpromise. Don't say things that you don't say you're going to do things that you can't do, or just really would be unachievable or unrealistic. Don't change formats for documents. Use clear, unfuzzy text and keep illustrations straightforward. So a lot of that you need to understand that rules regarding maybe illustrations or attachments. Are they going to form part of the word count or not? Don't change formats of documents. So it's better for the contracting authority if you submit a document in the same way that they've set it out rather than moving it over onto your own individual worksheet. Sometimes it can make it more confusing to the contracting authority to be able to evaluate when you've changed the formats and how certain attachments are made. So it's good to use the document that's been shared if possible. Um, Yep, so assumptions again, don't assume that the contracting authority knows what you do because that's not, if it's not how they've outlined that they're going to mark your bid submission, they can't. Um, so ignore the opportunity to continuously improve by using feedback from previous procurements to develop enhanced future bids. So it's unlikely that if especially for like standalone contracts, it's unlikely that you're going to win every one, but even opportunities where you have submitted a bid and you have for any reason been unsuccessful, you've applied for a framework and you didn't manage to get on this time, feedback will be provided from contracting authorities to use that to your advantage. Maybe bring the feedback to Go for Growth and we'll help you review it to understand maybe where you could improve for next time. If that is that, oh, actually, there was just a bit of detail missing there that could have got you a few more marks. It's learning and it's building knowledge for the next time. So I am aware that we are just slightly running over time then. So it's the last couple of slides that I do have for you now anyway. So some key messages, which we've already basically covered. So read all the documents carefully, make a note of key dates, ask any questions, whether to be aware of to pay. I never know how to say. You'll usually have to sign a confidentiality agreement for 2P information. So don't forget to do this. Have you uploaded everything? Double check everything before submission. As I said, slide deck will be shared with the information you see on the screen now. So this is accessing Go for Growth help and resources. So they are all live links for you to follow to find out a bit more about how we can support you. So if you've got any questions, you can contact support@goforgrowth.co.uk. There's a contact number on the screen, but email's probably usually better. Just if we can't answer your call, we'll get back to you in slower time. So an email we can come back to and maybe just book some time for a call in or something. The bookable calendar is to book a one-to-one mentoring session. So if it was a follow-up day you want to discuss something in more detail or you just want to have a chat about something, you're welcome to. And the Go for Growth website for membership resources, case study guidance, that kind of thing. But that does bring us to the end of the session. I know we have run over just slightly and I do apologise. But if anybody does have any questions, then please do go ahead. I didn't mean to turn that page off. But yeah, thank you very much everybody for attending today. I will stay around another couple of minutes just in case there are any questions that do come in slower time. But unless anybody does have any questions, just thank you for your time today. It doesn't look like we do have any questions, but thank you very much, everybody, for coming today. So I'm going to end the call. If anybody does think of any questions in any slower time, please do just drop us an email and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you do have. Thanks.